I was a divorce attorney for all those years. So I just watched on the sidelines as people went through it, right? And then I had my own. And then, I was like, wow, like, okay, so this is really hard. I was talking to somebody today and she was like, yeah, she's like, I thought about, killing myself several times. And I said, I think if anybody's being honest, everybody thinks about that. Not in the actual, like you're really suicidal or even that you're doing suicidal ideation, but like, it just is so overwhelming. Your life becomes so overwhelming that you're just like, I just don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, where's the no box? I just want to check it. I want to check the no box. I don't want to do this. But then, you take a deep breath, calm down, regroup, call somebody that you trust, a coach or somebody, friend, and then go, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And then it gets easier.
Extremely isolating, right? Because really even if you were not in a good relationship or marriage, you had somebody that could at least see you struggling with it. And when it's all you, it's a real mind fuck. I always tell people. Yeah. And I imagine having gone through it and coached it, is it easier to give advice than it is to take it on when it's yourself?
Well, that's interesting. When I came to my divorce, I really followed my own advice. I went and got expert legal advice, even though I knew what the lawyer was going to say. I paid for it because I know that, whoever an attorney has himself for a client is a fool for a client, right? Like, so I was like, okay, I went and got the legal advice that I needed. And then I was strategic about it and I followed my own advice. And I made decisions about what was going to be important to me, the things that I was willing to fight over. And for, me in particular, I decided that the kids, that was the place for me. If we were going to have a battle, that was going to be our showdown. If he had to take all the money and he had to take all the stuff, fine, take it. I can earn more money. I can buy more stuff. Like, I didn't care. If that was the price for me, then I was willing to pay it. And he didn't, I allowed him his process. I knew who he was, so I allowed that information to benefit me by okay, that's just how he's going to react to things. He's always going to react, to these certain things worse than others. And then gave him the space to kind of meet me in the middle somewhere. And we ended up doing it just fine. So I think, because I had so much experience, I didn't want to end up where many of my clients ended up. And I just made a firm decision at the beginning. And I had very blessedly, I had a cooperative partner, right? He didn't want the mess. He didn't want the shit show either, right? And I think, he said, he was a little afraid of me. He's like, I don't want to divorce you. Yeah. You know way too much. Yeah. And I was like, yeah.
There's a massive knowledge gap. That's why I always say, I didn't know there were divorce coaches when I was getting divorced. Right. So talk to, if not a coach, somebody that's gone through it, because you don't know what you don't know.
And you can't get up to speed. The ramp up is enormous, right? Right. It's like if somebody just dropped me in Zimbabwe right now, and we're like, go, I'd be like, I don't know the culture. I don't know the language. I don't know the geography. I don't know anything. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what happens to you when you are suddenly served with divorce papers, or just told that you're just like, whoa, wait a second, what just happened here? Right. Yeah.
And I always say, and we'll talk about it because we have a bunch of questions here from people, but once you sign the papers, it's like, all right, you graduated from preschool, now you're in kindergarten, go figure out co-parenting. And then once you got that semi-figured out, and it's time to start dating and see how that works out for you. So
good times all the way around, right?
Yeah. So we have some pre-sent in questions, and then at the end, if we have a minute, we're going to keep this to about 25 minutes. So we'll do some rapid fire. But for people that don't know, we have Erin Schaden. She is a divorce coach. She is a divorce lawyer or former divorce lawyer. Yep. Everything. Okay.
Well, I don't practice anymore, but I've been working, in divorce attorneying, divorce coaching, divorce mediation for 28 years.
Right. So you know what you need to know. So let's get right into these questions. And thank you to everybody who sent them in on our Instagram. I think people need to see other people ask questions, and that helps them say, "Oh, absolutely. I was wondering that too." Absolutely. So that's why we share it. All right. First question: how do I get my lawyer to call me back?
Oh, that's $1 million question. I would say persistence. would be the operative word. I find that so many people hire lawyers because they're desperate, right? And I really think that working with a coach or somebody knows the attorneys in your area that can point you to that. And also, like, so much of divorce is a gut check, right? Like, it's like, what does my gut say? Your head lies, your heart lies, but your gut's almost never wrong. And it's the same thing with hiring an attorney. And that's the number one complaint for attorneys, is that my attorney won't get back to me, right? And when I was managing a law firm, or when I was in practice, like, that was I go, we don't dangle clients ever. There should never be a 24-hour period that goes by without returning that clients, even if it's like, I don't have an answer for you, but you just don't dangle them out there. They're going through enough, you can't dangle them. So my first thing would be, like, if your attorney's not calling you back, maybe it's time to look at who that attorney is and whether they're really representing your best interest. Changing lawyers is hard, it's expensive, I wouldn't advise it. But if you have somebody that's not willing to communicate with you and keep you informed about your divorce, then maybe it's time to look at that. Short of that, I think a nicely worded email to them saying, hey, listen, I'm going through this divorce. I understand that this is one of many for you, but this is my divorce. These are my kids. These are my finances. This is where I'm living, and I'm in crisis. So I'm not sure why you're not responding, but we really need to work on our communication. What can I do to help that, move that along? And I think most attorneys phrased in that way would respond positively and say, oh God, I'm so sorry. I just was so busy, and my paralegal was sick, and then the receptionist was out with the, COVID, and like, and they'll get back on it, right? And if they just ignore that, then I really think you have to evaluate whether you have the right attorney or not.
That makes sense. And I think what we found is, even writing that message, it sounds easy to you. That's another place where a coach could be a good in-between. You can talk to them. How should I approach my lawyer? Is this a big deal? Because a lot of times we probably are picking up the phone for times that are not urgent, and maybe our lawyer's like, you don't want to spend $500 to ask me that question, but you do need to communicate it.
Absolutely. And I think that, lawyers tend to get really defensive, and clients are remiss in contacting their lawyers because they don't want to be charged, right? Because every time you talk to your lawyer, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And then two, they're afraid of making their lawyer mad. And I tell people all the time, like, it's your case. The attorney works for you, not the other way around. I always said, when I was running the law firm, I always said that we are a people business that happens to practice law, right? We are here to take care of our clients. We had a client one day who had a horrible coke problem, right? And we couldn't get her to focus on her divorce, right? Because she had a broken finger, right? So she had a drug addiction problem and she had a broken finger. And we couldn't get anywhere. We were just in this circular argument where we begin to get her to focus, and then she'd be like, oh, my finger really hurts. So we just had the paralegal take her out and take her to urgent care and get her finger fixed, right? Like, and then we could get down to business, right? And so I think attorneys can be defensive when you approach them, but I think if you ask for help, right? Like, hey, I'm not getting what I need here. How can we fix this? I need help here. Reminding the attorney that it's not just another case. It's your life, right? And most well-practicing attorneys will meet you there.
That's good advice. But yes, it's a stressful situation for sure. So have some compassion for yourself, but also be assertive. I think that's what we're looking
Absolutely.
For. All right, next question. We actually got, I'm gonna read off all three of these. I think they fall in the same bucket with co-parenting and communication. So I'll read these three, and then you can have at them. First question. My co-parent is dragging his feet paying medical bills. What can I do? Second related question. How do you co-parent with somebody when they've blocked all communication with you? And then a similar one. What do you do when your co-parent ignores messages on the co-parenting app? Can we do something without going to court?
That is the $1 million co-parenting question, right? How do you get somebody to engage that isn't willing to engage? And there are lots of things that you can do. You can get them hire a co-parenting coach if they're willing to work with you on that. If they are just stonewalling you, excuse me, if they're just stonewalling you, there isn't a lot that you're going to do, and you end up in a parallel parenting situation by default, right? I don't know many people that enter into like a parallel parenting kind of situation, you end up in a parallel parenting situation by default because the other person will not engage with you. And I think that getting some coaching around that, about how to do that effectively, where the lines are about what you can kind of parallel parent and what you absolutely kind of have to come back. I think asking your attorney, and I think more than anything else, it's creating a record, right? So like if you're going to go, like maybe you can't go into court because they're not paying the medical bills, right? Maybe like it's a $50 issue and it's going to cost you $3,000 to go to court. But if it's a repeated thing, keeping track, documenting, like the thing that's so important, I think, for people is to document, because a problem that an attorney is going to go, yeah, that's not a big deal, I can't do anything with that, is a problem, is it maybe is not actionable because it happened one time. But if it happens 50 times, you know, or if it happens repeatedly over time, like then the attorney's like, now I've got something to do something with, you know. So everybody always wants to avoid court, but the honest answer is you can't force somebody to meet you in the middle. You can't. And so, you know, if you are in that situation where the other parent is absolutely stonewalling you and is refusing to engage, then I really think you should get some advice about how to parallel parent, because that's kind of the situation that you're in, like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Can you give a 20-second, what is parallel parenting? Sure. For people that are never heard of it?
So parallel parenting is basically where you have a custody arrangement. There's a schedule in place, but basically your time is your time, and you're enrolling the kids and doing the things with the kids, and you're not really getting input. I mean, if it's a matter of health, safety, welfare, you're informing the other side on the app, like, hey, you know, Johnny fell down and skinned his knee today. No stitches, he's fine. You're doing all of the dutiful things that you need to do, but you're not really expecting any response back, right? And so you're just parenting, and then you have that's the easy part. The hard part is that they're going to do what they're going to do on their timetable, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to let them, right? So you kind of get the freedom to do what you're going to do with your child during your parenting time, but you also kind of have to give up the control over what's going to happen or not happen on that side until it becomes legally actionable, right? If they're not doing the kids' homework, if they're not giving them their insulin and the kid's diabetic, I mean, there are certain thresholds that you cross that you then have to involve the court system. But otherwise, you know, if it's like they do jujitsu on your time and they're doing soccer on dad's time and they're only going every other week, that's not ideal. It sucks, really, especially for the kid. But you know what? If you can't agree, then what else are you going to do, right? You just drive yourself crazy.
Right. Yeah. And from what I've heard is like, if you can be the safe, peaceful house, your kids will know that. And even though it's frustrating that you have no control over the other side of it, that's what you should focus your energy on, is being that calm place.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, next question, kind of a specific legal one. I work from home and can be with very young kids during the week. My husband wants to send the kids to daycare. Which way would a guardian ad litem go with?
That's a hard question. It really depends on the circumstances, right? How young are the kids? Why does the person want to go to daycare? Are there funds to support daycare? I mean, generally speaking, courts, guardian ad litems, people in positions of power in custody cases say that the children are best with the parents, right? But maybe in that particular case, maybe there's a lot of conflict, and you know, that would not be good for the kids. It would be better for the kids. You know, daycares are wonderful and schools are wonderful because it's a neutral exchange point, right? It eliminates contact between the two people that can't get along. So I think it's really fact specific. I think that there are certain facts that are going to lend somebody to say, no, the kids can just go be with mom. You know, the 1-year-old doesn't need to go to daycare for 40 hours a week because you don't want mom to have custody of the kid, right? That seems ridiculous, right? But the kid is, you know, 4 and is hyperactive and really needs it, you know, and maybe there's a younger child in the home. Maybe for daycare it would be a good idea. So it's really fact dependent upon those specific kids, those specific people, the reasons for it, the finances to support it, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I think that reason and rationale prevails, right? Usually.
Yeah, and you know, in that situation, there's no easy answer. Raising 2 kids from home while you're working is no picnic. Daycare is expensive, so yeah, these are tricky conversations for married couples. And then when you introduce divorce and co-parenting, I'm always just like, it's a very challenging thing to negotiate with somebody. Because again, this is a lot of times after a divorce, you're having these disagreements. So
yeah. Well, and then usually people want to change it up, right? You know, maybe the person was the stay-at-home parent the entire time, but now they're in a 50-50 custody situation, and the other parent's like, I can do this, you know, and then you disagree. I mediated that case yesterday.
Oh, yes. I imagine you have lots of stories.
I do.
Next question. I'm not sure if there's a question, but we'll read it off if you have any quick thoughts. My narcissistic ex is being super nice when they drop our kid off. I think he's after me.
Yeah, that's how narcissists behave, right? Like, what does he want, right? Like, what does he want? I would be asking myself the question. Right. Leopards don't change their spots.
All right, next one here. What do you do when the new wife is the one doing all of the things? It's overwhelming and confusing because of boundaries.
Oh gosh, significant others are the, you know, X factor in divorce. Usually they make it worse. Sometimes they make it better. There really isn't much that you can kind of do about that. I think if the boundaries are being crossed where the new wife is being called mom, there's only one mom, there's only one dad. Research, psychologists, and everybody will tell you that when you allow the children to call people who aren't parents, names reserved solely for parents, it degrades the role, it's confusing to the kids, and it's just not good for them. So if those kind of boundaries are being crossed, they really think that a mental health professional should be involved to help kind of steer it back.
Erin, keep talking. I'm going to take 5 seconds to give my kid a screen, but keep talking about this one. This is a big one.
Sure. I think that oftentimes the new spouse does take on all of these roles, and it is threatening, and it feels very artificial. And so I think you have to figure out what boundary is being crossed and how important it is to you, and then what you can do about it. You know, I think working with a coach can help you come up with some ideas about how to manage your feelings and take positive action, and then also steer you towards an attorney if it's legally actionable about kind of what boundaries are being crossed. It's a tough situation. All day.
Good. And thank you for handling that. I had to give a charger to an iPad to a kid.
That's okay.
We're back.
Right. Hey, this is our reality.
This is it, right? Keep it real. Not sure exactly the context for this one, but what is a good 60-40 split proposal? If I pull child support, X will agree to this.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they're asking. You know, the schedule is really whatever works for your life. I mean, whether, you know, people get hung up on percentages, right? I mean, I think that whatever 60-40 split works for you, right? I mean, if that's the split, giving up child support, I think you really need to talk to your attorney. Most of the time, that's a non-negotiable. You're not able to do that. And so you are kind of doing it wink, wink, nod, nod between the two of you. But the court is going to order support unless there's a really good reason not to. If there's a disparate income between the two parties, they're going to order it because the child support is for the children, not for you, right? It's the child's. You know, it's for the support of the child. So I'm not sure exactly what the question's asking. So right. I'm not.
Imagine you see a lot of times where they're like, I just want a little more parenting time. What if I give up some money? Do you see that a lot? Do you advise your clients maybe don't play that game?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look, really what everybody should be focused on is first and foremost, is what is in the best interest of the children, right? They're the innocents in all of this. They didn't ask for it, they didn't want it. And if any kid could wave a magic wand, regardless of time and experience, they would get their parents back together like that. Most kids, right? Except in those super high conflict situations where they wish their parents would never speak to each other again. But I think that, you know, it really depends on the time. Right? Like what is more important to you? And here's the thing is that child support is always modifiable. So you could, you know, in most places, in most states, it's always going to be looked at. So you can lock down your deal and then the person could go run in court and say, I need child support, right? So like that can always happen as well. Like most of the time under under any circumstances, the court, as long as they're under 18, is going to look at child support.
All right, good answer. Next one. Is there a way a child under the age of 18 can decide when they want to go to each parent's house?
Well, I mean, kids, yeah. I mean, teenagers, they speak with their feet, right? Like, what are you going to do? your 15-year-old says, I'm not going to mom's. What are you going to do? Call the police?
Mm-hmm.
Really? You know, like some people do. You know, some people, you know, you have to decide what hill you're going to die on, right? And the teenagers really do have a lot of power. I've had cases where, you know, a case where the judge ordered the 16-year-old girl to go spend time with her mom. And she said, how are you going to the judge's face, how are you going to make me? And the judge was like, had no answer, right? A veteran judge on the bench for 30 something years was like, I don't know. You can't, right? You know, and to me, you got to get underneath what that is. Like, what is it? Sometimes it's just an identification, you know, boys want to be with their dad and moms maybe want to be with girls want to be with their moms. Maybe that's the dynamic that's going on. So maybe you could include some activities that, you know, are maybe more in line with what the other parent does with them or something. But really, at the end of the day, as unfortunate as it is, teenagers most particularly are going to speak with their feet, and they're like, I'm not going. And then you have to decide to what lengths you're going to go to enforce the court orders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure raising my kids are younger, but teenagers are tough as is. When you have this dynamic, you do, and you've had this kind of co-parenting setup, and that changes. That can be a real shock to the system, where your kid's just like, I don't want to live at this house anymore, and you've got to be adaptive to that.
Yeah, well, I think also the other thing is that keep in mind that rarely in custody are things permanent, right? Everything's always like, it's kind of like, remember when your kids were babies and it's like, you finally got the baby thing down and then you're like, oh damn, now they're eating solid food. And you're like, that's a whole different routine. And then, you know, and at every level, you're like, I got this. And then you're like, oh my God, everything just changed. Custody's like that, right? You get it, but custody for babies, custody for toddlers, custody for early school age children, it just changes, right? And so it's always going to be different, always going to be different. And so even if the kid's like, oh, I'm going to stay with dad and I'm not coming back to your house, like oftentimes that happens and then they change back, right?
Interesting. All right, next one. How do you best detach from what the ex will tell your kids when they're making decisions for them?
I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that.
I think on that, I imagine it's like, how do you deal with your ex telling your kids what they're going to tell them, which might not be the truth or might not be what you're telling them? It's like that they're hearing two different stories. How do you advise clients to handle that?
It's real. I mean, kids listen to what you say, but they watch what you do far more than they listen to what you say. Kids are observers of people, and divorce is no different. It just gives them a lot of different opportunities to observe a lot of different things. So I think you just have to be consistent, you know, and, you know, don't malign the other parent. That's not true. And I didn't say that and get defensive. I think you just have to say, you know, well, I do love you and I do enjoy spending time with you. What would you like to do? And then divert the conversation and then just continue to show up for them. You know, oftentimes, I mean, alienation is a real thing. It happens, right? And, you know, when you hear kids venomously speaking of one parent, that is, to me, the clearest indication that alienation is going on. And that is incredibly legally complex. It's emotionally complex. It's psychologically complex. And if you're in that kind of situation, you really need excellent service providers, attorneys, counselors, to be able to ferret that out. And the earlier you catch it, the better, right? But the court system just deals with it pretty badly across the board.
Right. And I've learned from listening to other coaches, really all you can do is listen to them. How does it make you feel when they say that? And really don't apply judgment. And it's so hard to do, but I found just like letting them speak is really one of the most successful parenting things you can do.
And then, you know, in a non-defensive way, you can send a message to the other side and say, you know, I'm not saying that this is true, but from, you know, Johnny came home again and said that you said X. Is that true? Did you say that? And engage, try to engage them in kind of ferreting out what the truth is, because kids make stuff up too, right? And kids want your favor, so they will curry favor. If they know that you want dad to be bad-mouthed, then they will bad-mouth dad, and vice versa. So you got to kind of ferret out what's really going on there. Is it really the ex that's saying it, or is the kid making it up to win you over?
Right. All right, another one in the court system. Why isn't emotional abuse taken more seriously in the legal system? how do the courts expect women to pay $20,000 in legal fees without access to money?
Oh, that is like the saddest question, right? Because emotional abuse, I think the courts, like I know in California, um, have really this coercive control element is definitely a part of domestic violence conversations. And I think that that's a kind of a wave that, is maybe starting in California and it kind of goes across the country. So I think that it's going to change, right? And be taken. The difficulty is that it's so hard to prove, right? Because I tell people all the time, like, there are facts, right? But just because something's factual doesn't mean it's ever going to see the judge, right? Because there's this magic process that facts go through to become evidence, right? And people will say, well, I have the text messages from the girlfriend who said this. And I'm like, how are you going to get the girlfriend in court? She lives in another state. How are you going to get jurisdiction over her to get her there? Like, these are hard questions, right? So it's very difficult to prove in a court of law because of the rules of evidence, because of the procedures and stuff. It's not fair. It isn't. And having to spend I've seen people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to prove that with very little success. It's so nuanced that the legal system just isn't set up to handle that kind of stuff. A bruise, a smack, a red mark, something like that is shocking, and it gets you. But getting on the stand and saying that they did this to me and this to me and this to me, the judge's eyes glass over and they tend to be like, he said, she said. It doesn't make it any less real. It doesn't change it from emotional abuse. It's just, how do you action that, right? Because the other side isn't just sitting there going, yeah, I did that. The other side saying, no, they did that to me. And then the judge is in this place like, I don't know what's real. Right. And how do I get at that? So it's that's the saddest stuff right there, where there is significant emotional abuse going on, and there's so very little that can be done without spending a fortune.
I think that's the real pain point, is like, the legal system costs money. So are there ways around it? And, I think that is the other benefit of having somebody like a coach. You can see what are your options before diving right in. All right, a couple more before we have to go. Sure. Is mediation worth it if the other person wants to remain married?
Absolutely. I mean, in most places, like, you're not staying married. If one of you wants out, you're getting out. And mediation, I think, is an excellent place, because, at least the way that I mediate, the mediation process is designed to help people process the emotions, right? And to vent the emotions, right? And throughout the process. So if you've got one person that's like, I'm done, I want a divorce, I'm done with this marriage, and you got another person that's like, I really want to try. If you can get them to the mediation table, there's a process that's in place that will allow them to process those emotions and see the light of day that, they're not going to be able to stop this. So you can do it the hard way, litigating and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, or you can do it the easy way that attends to the emotional nature of both parties. The person who wants out and is losing their mind because they want out, and the other person who's like clinging and going, no, I can't let you go, and I think mediation is the perfect place to deal with that. Or relational coaching, right? Which I do also, working with couples who probably his marriage is going to end, but how to end it, and is there a last gasp? Before maybe sending them back to the marriage counselor to really begin to work on that, improving their communication skills so that they can actually make the time productive.
The person in the comments here says mediation is only worth it if both people are paying for it. Is that a common thing? How does that work, the financial setup of mediation?
Oh, well, I think it does. I think both people have to have buy-in. I don't agree that both people have to be paying for it. I think that, if you've got disparate resources where, I'm going to say wife is earning $1 million a year and dad's been a stay-at-home dad, it doesn't make sense to make dad pay for it necessarily. But if dad's getting, $40,000 a month in spousal support, well, then yeah, he should. I agree generally speaking, both people should have buy-in and skin in the game.
And to the person's question as well, usually in divorce, one person might want to remain married, but you don't have to have two people agree to get divorced. One person can make that decision.
In most places, yeah. I mean, the no fault that went through, pretty much, I think some states still, like I know Maryland still, had kind of some antiquated, hurdles that you have to jump through, and some states still have that kind of stuff, but you can't force somebody to stay married to you.
Mm-hmm.
If they want out, they're going to get out.
All right, two more. We got a lot of like replies about this one. How to get over 26 years together. He got engaged less than a year into the separation while we're still married.
Yeah, that's that significant other problem, right? It would be great if we as a society ended one relationship before we began another, but that just isn't the case. And infidelity, or, you know, maybe there wasn't infidelity in that particular relationship, but there was just, I mean, the problem that I see is that we lie to ourselves, right? We lie to ourselves that this is the right person for us, that we're happy in that marriage, and we go on for way longer than we should. Most people are unhappy in their relationship for 6 years before they do anything about it. That's a very long time. And in that time, that person who's unhappy begins to leave the marriage, so that by the time they end up here 26 years and is engaged afterwards, I mean, to me, that seems like maybe there might be some overlap in relationships there. But if there wasn't, it's like that person mentally left that marriage a long time ago. So while the actual time between telling the spouse and going through the process is very short, the person who's left the marriage years ago, right? And so they're ready. They're like a horse in the starting gate. Let me get this going, right? And that is incredibly painful. And unfortunately, people are often more excited to begin their new lives than they are to caretake the feelings of the person that they shared a life with for all those years. And, you know, the payoff would be better for everybody if they would be a little bit more sensitive to that. But that's not the world that we live in, right? Unfortunately, reality dictates that people are going to just come and say, I want a divorce, I've been having an affair, and I'm getting engaged. And that becomes your reality. So I really hope that that person is getting the resources that they need to be able to heal that pain, right? Not allow it to turn into bitterness, not allow that emotion to drive their divorce, because they're going to spend more money, financial currency and emotional currency in that regard.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I mean, that first 2 years, I don't care how amicable it is when somebody's dating or there's a affair partner, it is just a really hard period for anybody to get through. So I think some level of just like accepting it and self-compassion for like, this is going to be brutal. It will get easier,
Yes.
But it's weird how things actually get harder, you know, right after the divorce in a lot of ways, because you're, you know, thrust into this new reality that is completely foreign. And
well, yeah, you didn't see it coming. Yeah. You know, you're happy. I mean, most people are like, I was happy, but, you know, there were some issues and I knew about them, but, you know, I thought we were going to work them out. And, you know, when the other person says, nope, not only am I not working them out, I'm leaving you and I've got this other person, you know?
Yeah. And I think what you said too, one of the two people has usually made this decision or checked out a little earlier, so another person is like processing it kind of at a different time frame. So very confusing stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that, you know, there's no one of the things that's super important is to build into your divorce time for processing your own and the other person's, right? But, you know, if you've got a partner that is willing to do that, that's great. But most of the time you don't, you know. And I will say this: once you've made the decision to leave, it's really hard to stay.
That's the truth. Erin, thank you so much. Yeah. Let people know where they can find and connect with you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I was so excited to meet you, and beyond this, it's an honor and a privilege. Thanks so much for having me.
You can find Erin on Instagram at Erin Schaden. Is that the
Erin
handle?
E. Schaden, I think Erin it is, but Erin E. Schaden. Yep.
You can find us at WTF Divorce. Thank you, everybody, for submitting your questions. We will have a recording, and we're going to do more of these, so there's more place for people to submit their questions. So thank you, Erin. I'm going to go tend to a 6-year-old that needs a charge.
Go get those iPads and chargers going.
It's outside time now. All right.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Take care.
Erin, see ya.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.